Hey, and welcome. What would happen? Imagine a world. What would happen if you were able to do all the things that you loved and you didn't have to do the stuff that you didn't love? Like, what would that look like for you and in your business? We are going to talk about that today. Again, we've been talking about delegating. The secret key to that is delegating. And we've worked through what should you delegate, who should you delegate to, and then how do you do it? Today is part two of the how do you do it. 8 steps. We talked about 3 of them last week. Feel free to check into those. And today we're going to talk about 3 more. So first, who are we? I'm Lisa Crilley Mallis, and I am a time strategist for business owners as they are trying to figure out how they can do more of what they love and less of what they don't love. And I am joined today by Laura Licursi.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, and so I am Laura, and I am the owner of Elite Virtual Assistants. I help attorneys, busy professionals, and business owners go from being busy to productive with our virtual assistant services. And then I also support virtual assistants in the space with resources and trainings. And I also have an online course for them to teach them how to build their own virtual assistant business. So everything virtual assistant that you can think of. So as we have talked about over the last few weeks here, delegating is essential if you want to grow both personally and professionally. So as a business owner, you need to delegate, and even in your private life, you need to be able to delegate, right? If you are going to keep moving that needle forward. Because when you try to do everything yourself, you're going to be maxed out because you can only do so much. Going back to, Lisa's point of there's only 168 hours in a week. So you are only going to be able to grow to whatever capacity, you can perform that work at in the amount of time that you have in a given week, day, or month. So, and the flip side of that is a lot of us have gone into business so that we had this, flexibility of, I'm going to kind of work when I want. But the reality of that isn't true. Typically, we're working twice as much as somebody in an office. And what we need to do is to be able to find, that balance, because we don't want to be spending the time, our evening hours or our weekends, getting caught up even on the personal side of things, cleaning our house and doing that kind of stuff, and then trying to mix work into that, because what we didn't get to fit in during our 80-hour work week. So, you need to understand that delegating is really important. And I think sometimes people look at it that you have to delegate this huge amount in order to make a difference, but that's really not true. It can really be the smallest amount that actually helps you, tremendously.
It's a destination or it's a journey. Oh my goodness. It's a journey, not a destination. It's just one thing off your plate, which leaves room to get another thing off your plate, which leaves room to get another thing off your plate. The idea is never to say, okay, I'm going to do these 3 things and I'm going to delegate these 70. It truly is just one thing at a time to start freeing up a little more time. Because you're absolutely right, Laura. The more people I work with, the more times I hear, I started my business for freedom and flexibility, and I'm working myself to work. All I do is work. And on the flip side, you may be watching this right now, and in that space where you have more time freedom than you've had in the past, I implore you to continue listening to Laura and I right now. This is the perfect time for you to start to set up systems and move things off your plate, because you have the freedom to be able to think a little bit more. So no matter where you are in the cycle right now, some of you right now are watching and you're watching on the replay and you've hit that little thing to make us talk even faster than we already do because you're really tight on time. Right now is when you used to want to start documenting processes and moving a couple things off your plate also. So wherever you are, now is the perfect time to start. With that being said, let's jump into our steps 4, 5, and 6 from our 8 steps. So just to recap, step 1 was choosing the best person. Step 2 was determining the appropriate level of delegation. And then step 3 was meeting with the individual and actually stating the desired results. And so for more in-depth ideas on those, you want to just click back to our previous recording. This one, step 4, is establish a time frame and a follow-up schedule. So here are my tips on this. When you're establishing a time frame and follow-up schedule, co-create that. Meaning, talk with the person that you're delegating to, ask them when would they like to check in. And if you feel like they want to check in a little later than what you're comfortable with, you can also suggest another time to check in. What you want to avoid happening is getting to the very end, right before the project's due, and finding out that the person either had no idea what to do and they were too embarrassed to ask or too hesitant to ask. And they waited till the last second, finally realized there was no way they could figure it out. And so now they're coming to you and there's no way to hit the deadline. Or they think they're on the right path and you recognize they are 1000% not on the right path. And again, you're going to miss the deadline. And so one of my clients delegated a list of tasks that she thought was pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand, pretty simple to implement. And she delegated them and she said, okay, do these every day for a week. And then she says, I'll check in on you Friday to make sure they're done. And she gets to Friday and she realized that the person misunderstood like probably half of the list, and all week long had been doing things incorrectly. So I'm imploring you, check in early, make sure they're on track, and then schedule additional check-ins along the way.
Yeah, especially in the very beginning. And I think what's really important to remember is you have to take that time up front to check in all the time because of situations like that happening, because that is what will happen, that if it's not caught right away and the person doesn't know that they're doing something wrong, then that pattern is just going to, continue to be repeated until somebody realizes, hey, this is wrong. And I think of it as being really relatable to like teaching our kids how to do something, right? So we teach our kids to do stuff on their own so that they can become independent people, which you want these people that are going to be working for you to become independent. And it's also freeing something up off your plate. So if you're not willing to delegate anything and get it out, you're really not helping anybody that way, right? Because you're staying stuck doing everything. And trust me, I know as a mom, how many times, I mean, just business owning aside, how many times I'm like, I'll just do it because it's faster for me to do it. But guess what? I'm continually doing it, like putting the dishes in the dishwasher over and over and over again, right? No, I had to finally stand over my son and watch him every time for about a week straight until it, became more of a habit for him. So it's kind of putting that time in initially so that you have that time freed up down the road.
Absolutely. I think of, and this doesn't exactly fall in this step, but my brain is going there, so I'm going to share it with everyone. It's that idea of, are you enabling or are you teaching skill set?
Yeah.
We want to scaffold our teaching away, meaning we're tight at the beginning and then we start to give them more space and more space and more space as we reach out so that they can learn and grow on their own. And many times we want to protect the people that we're working with. And so that in turn though becomes enabling. So it's like, oh, I just want to help you, like when you delegate, when really you want to say, okay, here's what you need, go forth and conquer. And make sure that we can talk about it along the way. So those check-in schedules help that. So our next step is to grant the authority needed. And I always think about how when kids are little, someone will tell them something and they'll say, you're not the boss of me. Right?
I still get that.
You're like, maybe they don't have to be little. But to your point, Laura, that's in people's heads as adults. And so sometimes we will delegate something to someone where they actually have authority over someone else or a group of other people. And if you don't share with them that this person really is the boss of them, it can cause some tension in the workplace. And so when you want to make sure that when you're delegating that you grant authority, whether it's by saying, hey, Katie's in charge of this project, So people get it that Katie is kind of the boss of them. And you also want to make sure they have access to information. They have access to where things are stored, whether digitally or physically. One of my clients, their entire workforce is virtual, and they have the ability to hire subcontractors as needed to finish projects out. And what they recognized was that a lot of the subcontractors they hired didn't have access to the information and data they needed to do their job because they weren't actual part-time employees or full-time employees. They were just contracted for the project. And so they actually hired a person to be the gatekeeper between these subcontractors and the rest of the team to make sure they could get the data and the information they needed in real time. So you want to make sure that they have access to everything they need. Keys, passwords, all of that. Because right now, so much stuff is resting in your head as the business owner, and you need to get that out to them in a way so that they can do their jobs.
Yeah, and one little tip I want to give on the password thing, because that's one thing that when we have people that come to us who have not used a virtual assistant before, they get very, and I understand, they say, I don't want to give up my keys to the castle. Why? I don't want to give this information out. And there are ways around that. So a big one that I always tell people to use is called LastPass. You can get the free version. You can actually, it's great for you anyways, personally and for your business, because you can store all of your password information in this app, and then you can share just the, that actual program with that person. And then this way, if for whatever reason things don't work out, you need to revoke access, whatever it is, all you have to do is take them off of the app. They never actually have your login information. So they only have the access that you give them to get into that application. So that's just one little tip about the passwords, because I know that's like very, that's a big thing for people. But, going back to what you were talking about and like granting that authority, we touched on this last week, but a really big thing too is just being, really clear about what the expectations are and how much authority you are going to give people. So, and, Tim Ferriss actually gives some really good examples in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, because he's like the master delegator. And, he talks about when for his company, one of the things that they had people doing was customer service. And he did not want people coming to him all the time saying, well, what do I do in this case? What do I do in that case? So what he did is he gave a dollar amount, and he said, you can refund up to $75, no questions asked. If it's above that, then, we need to have somebody approve it, or, it has to go to management, whatever. But so you're giving people the authority to do their job, and you're giving them parameters, to work within. And what was the other thing that I was going to talk about? Oh, gift giving. So a lot of times people will have their virtual assistant, buy gifts for the online, usually, and just give them a dollar amount. Okay. Like you could spend up to this, but you also have to be really specific in what you like and what you don't like, and what it is about this one thing that I don't like, so you've got to you can't just say, I don't like that, but I like this. But okay, well, what is it about this item that you don't like, so that I don't pick something else, because I don't know the real reason behind what you like and don't like. So it's getting really, really clear when setting up those parameters. And, I always say it, I think actually Tim Ferriss says it in his book. It's like, you have to think of like you're talking to an elementary school person, even though, we're all highly educated and professional, we're not in your brain. So, you need to be able to get all of those little pieces out so that you are like really, really being clear on what you want and what you don't want.
Right. Absolutely. And when we think about, like you just said, we're not in your brain. You want to try to figure out how can you download your brain to them as quick and as easy as possible. And so, which leads me into step 6, which is be available, but don't micromanage. When they have clear parameters, there's less of a need to micromanage. Like when you can handle step 5 about giving them the authority, giving them the structure. Look, if X happens, you can handle it. If Y happens, you can't. And all the gray that's in the middle is going to be closer to either X or Y. And so just jump on that. Well, when you handle step 4 about setting up check-ins and you are really clear about parameters on step 5, step 6 is so much easier. You don't have as much to micromanage. They're pretty clear about what they're doing. They're checking in with you along the way. You've already set that up. It's so much easier to step back. Here's another way to do that. And that is to have them fill out the answer to these 3 questions. And you can do this every day if you need to. So this is early in your delegating journey and you're having a hard time letting go. This could be every day. This could also be every day for people who are new to you or new to the task. But the 3 questions are, what did you do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? And what do you need from me? That makes sure things are moving along. It also makes sure that they're thinking about your project before the next time that you're meeting with them, so they're not stuck at the last minute. And finally, it helps with that grant authority piece, like, what do you need from me? Because many times that what do you need from me is either clarity, because they're not in your brain, or access to data that you didn't realize they didn't have access to.
Yeah, those are great questions. That's great. So the other thing that I just want to throw in is, do not, and I don't want this to come out wrong, but don't be unapproachable, because that is the worst. I mean, it's bad in any situation, but when somebody feels like they cannot come to you and ask you a question, it's not going to get resolved, and you're not going to get the results that you want. So you've got to be approachable. You've got to be there and be responsive. If somebody, especially in the very beginning, if somebody has a question and then they're going to get stuck, they can't move forward without knowing what your answer is. Or if you make them feel, because we've had this happen with clients, the VA will come to me and say, I've reached out so many times and, they're not answering me. And I know that they're really busy and I don't want to bother them. And it's like, you bother them until they tell you to not bother you, because you can't do your job if you don't have, these other pieces in place. So that's just a really big piece of advice, is just always be approachable to people so they feel that they can, reach out to you. Because in the beginning, it is that learning period. And now if they're still reaching out to you 6 months later and really not catching on, then you might have a problem. But in the beginning, it is important.
Right. And I think it comes down to, people will reach out because, like I always say, if someone has questions, it's on you, the delegator. It means you weren't clear enough, or you didn't set the process up enough, or they don't have access to the information that they need. And so you want to make sure when they're reaching out to you that you go back and think, oh, okay, wait a minute, where's the breakdown happening? I mean, sometimes there is just a mismatch. The person in the task or the project doesn't match, but typically it's because you were in a hurry to get it off your plate. And so you didn't think it through as well as you could have, and that leads a lot of questions. And so a couple tips, if you're in that position where you're feeling like, I'm so busy, I don't have a chance to answer their question. I use a try 3 before me often, meaning look for the information you're needing in 3 different places before you come back to me. I also will ask people who I work with to reread the instructions they got from me more than once, because odds are good the answer is in there. You just went through it really quickly. So 3 before me is one. The other one is have office hours where you say to your employees or your VAs, look, if you have questions, I'm available between this time and this time. That way your day isn't broken up, 10 minutes here, an hour here, constantly interrupted answering questions. Just say, here are my office hours. Jump in anytime you need questions.
I love that 3 before me. That's awesome. That's a good one.
All right. So we are to our
Our success stories.
We are to our success stories, right? Did you have anything else you want to add on? Be available and don't micromanage?
No, that's it. Just be approachable. I
We
can't
are
get enough. Be approachable.
So we're to our success stories. Go, Laura, go.
Okay, so what I've been seeing so much more now too is, we've been talking about, well, where do you want to be when we come out of this? But we might not be coming out of this, or it might be a really long time. I mean, we will eventually get out of this, but a lot of clients I'm seeing right now are trying to look at, okay, if my main core or structure of my business is not going to be back to full capacity by X, I need to have I need to be able to go off in these different directions to supplement until I can get back to X, right? So we have been seeing a lot of that. And like we talked about, just cleaning up of the projects and things like that. So 3 of the biggest ones that have been coming in to us lately, so I'm sure that there's a lot of other people out there needing to do the same thing, is really going through, what is the first one? It is the lead management, the lead generation. And it's really cleaning up what you've got, right? Because so many people have their databases that they probably, you're busy, you haven't looked at them in years, right? It's going in, it's cleaning all of that up, maybe just getting in touch with everybody that you haven't been in touch with for so long, and getting a nice clean start for that, once you are back up and running. And sometimes it'll spark some ideas on, what, this might be another avenue that I could go down, because I've seen some of our clients, some of them, have done that with their lead, going through their old leads. Social media, again, staying visible. And now is a really good time to, if, depending on where your audience is, it's a really good time to be on social media and be running ads, because so many people are home, everybody's on their phone. So it's a good time for that. And then website updates, a lot of times we get busy. It's the last thing that we do. So if there's, pages that you want to change or stuff you want to swap out, now is a really good time to do that, especially if you're going to be changing things up or adding, new products or services to what you already have.
Ooh, those are really good uses of, people's times and of your resources. Mm-hmm. I think about, I was on a webinar yesterday and the person asked me, what are you seeing, right now from your clients and things like that. And one of the things that came up was that now we are seeing where processes are broken. So talking about your lead magnet piece and the funnel and the sales funnel and all of that, mm-hmm. You don't realize it's not strong until the leads coming in the top are fewer.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that wasn't great. Or like a salesperson whose skills aren't great, like they may have a low close rate, but they may be hitting their targets because they had so many in. Where now, if there's fewer in, they're still closing at the same percentage, but they're not anywhere near their targets. And so now we're finding processes aren't as strong as we thought they were, and being able to reach out to you to help streamline them and make them easier to use and more robust. Like that is the perfect time to help save time and money moving forward. Like there's more than 1 times the ROI there. Like it's awesome. Mm-hmm. One of the success stories I'll share with you is when I was working with a client, and when this happened, they, everyone started to work remotely, and they went into this panic of, oh my gosh, my people don't know how to work remotely. We need to do something. And right as we were about to launch a training, they came back and they said, we can't do anything now because we have all these other huge things we have to get done. And so this is no longer our top priority. Now they've gone through a couple pay cycles, and it has become a top priority again. Because who would have thought they have all these workers who are not working well remotely. And so what we talked about was, how can we support the managers to support the workers, and how can we support the workers? Because that's 2 different lenses there. And what we decided was a short training. Like right now, attention spans are shorter than they've ever been. So let's do a short training on the managers, with the managers on how to support their workers. But let's do a drip campaign of videos to the workers. And let's keep part of it pointed to working remotely. But let's also make sure there's some things in there that are evergreen, that are just plain and simple good work habits, good productivity habits. And then this way, their investment up front is something that they're going to be able to use for training over and over and over again, because we don't know what the other side of this looks like. And working remotely may end up being a big part of their culture. And there is some retraining that needs to happen, but we can do it in small bites. And so that's the route they chose to go, was a short training and then videos implemented over and over again. I think that's smarter. I think learning happens over time and sticks. There's a much better stickiness to it than one big, let's pull everyone together for 2 hours. Like, that is just not working, especially not now.
Right. Agreed. Actually, that's great. It's great that they're doing that too.
Yeah.
And look how helpful you can be there.
Right. I know. I was very excited about that. I like when at first and they were like, oh no, this isn't a priority anymore. I was like, what? And now I was like, really? You pay people and they're not really getting stuff done because they're not, because of lack of wanting to, but because they're in a new world and they're not sure how to handle it yet.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about people who have had very structured jobs, now being home with little structure at all and other distractions, like, they need support. So I was super excited when they picked the project back up. So that being said, we are closing in on the end. 2 more of our 8 steps we'll talk about next week, Wednesday at noon Eastern. And then we are going to dive into a whole nother topic, which we're not going to tell you what it is yet. We'll tell you next week.
Top secret.
Right. It is definitely top secret. If you've missed any of our past episodes, you want to make sure that you find them and watch them. And you can find them right here where you're watching this one. Just scroll back. Also, scrolling across the bottom of the screen is how you can get a hold of Laura and myself. Also, there's a guide in there at that bit.ly link that will share all 8 steps and also these steps in more detail. And there's also resources of 20 people that you can delegate to. So we encourage you to jump in on that resource. Until next week. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Delegating genius.